Hello to you and welcome to Inside the Americas. I'm Stuart Norval. Here's what's coming up for you on today's show. We have a special report as just over 2 months ago, our correspondent spoke to a Mexican photojournalist in one of the most dangerous places in the world for reporters. He's since been murdered. We ask if Barack Obama's new big climate change plan is his latest attempt to leave a legacy. And 5 years on from the rescue of the Chilean miners, we're with the stars, including Antonio Banderas, as a new film on what happened has its premiere. We begin then in Mexico, in the state of Veracruz. It is said to be the most dangerous place for journalists across the American continent. Last Friday, a photojournalist who'd worked there was assassinated, the 14th, in fact, in just 5 years. 31-year-old Ruben Espinosa had long been threatened. Well, France 24's team in Mexico met with him at the end of May and filmed his working conditions. Here's Laurence Cavillier and Mathieu Comin.
Noah just lost his friend and colleague. He used to cover the news with Ruben Espinosa in Veracruz, a state notorious for being one of the most dangerous places for journalists in the world. Ruben had exiled himself to Mexico City for his own safety after realizing that he was being followed in his hometown.
I remember the last time I spoke with Ruben. He told me, I just want them to let me do my work. In Veracruz, there was so much pressure, it was very scary. He had to take a lot of precautions.
Ruben was murdered in the heart of the capital city, along with 4 women who were also tortured and raped. We had met with Ruben 2 months ago in Jalapa, where he used to work. He'd been intimidated and once even hit by the police.
Personally, I don't trust any government institution. I fear them.
He was always looking over his shoulder. Even when he covered this small teachers' protest march, he had to keep an eye out for undercover police and orejas, the government's ears on the ground, who take photos and notes on what journalists are doing.
If we count, there's about 13 or 14 of them. And here, we're just 7 or 8 journalists. You can't take photos of anything, not as a civilian nor as a journalist. But you also can't say anything to the police if they take pictures of you, because if you dare denounce them, then you might not make it through the night.
Despite that, Ruben would not be silenced. In this video from November 2014, he's taking part in a protest demanding justice. Justice for 13 other journalists murdered in Veracruz since Governor Javier Duarte took office in 2010. He would share their fate just a few months later.
Here in Jalapa, they dumped our colleague's body in pieces over there, a couple of roads from the governor's palace. This government has been the most repressive of the press.
We've repeatedly asked the government for interviews, but they will not speak with us. These murder cases are riddled with impunity, and not one has been fully resolved.
I just cannot get my head around the fact Ruben is now part of the statistics. He's the 14th journalist murdered.
Should he stay or throw in the towel? Noah doesn't know yet. In Mexico, over 100 journalists have been killed in 15 years.
Now, we're the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, and we're the last generation that can do something about it. Those are the words of the US President Barack Obama as he challenged America and the rest of the world to step up efforts to fight global warming. His Clean Power Plan, an audacious idea to fight global warming just 18 months before the end of his term. Obama perhaps trying to make his mark on history. Here's Olivia Salazar-Winspear.
It's a 7-year-old promise. Cutting down greenhouse gases was one of Barack Obama's major priorities, and it remains so today.
That if we don't get it right, we may not be able to reverse. And we may not be able to adapt sufficiently. There is such a thing as being too late when it comes to climate change.
In this short film, he underlines the urgency of the issue and the threat it poses to future generations. The man who came to power pledging "Yes, we can" in 2008 is now seeking to channel that hope into tangible results for the years to come.
When he gets to the end of his second mandate, every US president asks himself the question, what kind of image will I have in the history books of the future? Fundamentally, what Barack Obama is doing now is shaping his image for posterity.
With a Republican Congress often hostile to his projects, some would think the president has been hamstrung. On the contrary, in recent months he's achieved significant victories. After the Supreme Court signed off on the so-called Obamacare health insurance legislation, it ruled to legalize gay marriage in every state. Beyond winning judicial battles, US diplomacy has made strides, resulting in an historic handshake with Raul Castro, which saw the US and Cuba reopen their embassies in both countries this summer. On July 14th, relations with Iran improved as well, as the P5+1 countries signed an agreement with Tehran over the nuclear issue, an unprecedented move. It all points to a picture of a pragmatic president whose decisions will influence the country's future. Yet for this specialist, it's still early to speculate on Obama's legacy.
What we can say about all that is that circumstantial factors have been in Barack Obama's favor. But it's yet to be seen whether, in the years to come, these circumstances will result in concrete and applicable measures.
The battle is far from won then. The agreement with Tehran has not yet come into force, but it's already been met with stern opposition from Congress. And as for his environmental projects, Republican representatives have already promised to wage a judicial war on Barack Obama's Clean Power Plan. As campaigning for the next presidential election starts in earnest, the plan itself will no doubt spark lively debate among Republicans as well as Democrats, which could be part of Obama's strategy, pushing this long-ignored issue onto the political stage.
Now, 1 year before the opening ceremony of the 2016 Rio Olympics, and so far the construction of sporting venues is mostly running to time. That, according to the city's mayor. One big controversy, though, is the authorities' broken promise to treat 80% of the polluted water at the site of the sailing events. As Julia Kim reports, so far, only 50% of it has been purified.
The legendary Copacabana Beach, just one of the sites of the 2016 Olympic Games. With 12 months to go until the main spectacle, athletes have already made a splash in the first qualifying events. But the enthusiasm is more lukewarm than usual, tempered by ongoing concerns about Rio's water pollution.
I swam in the water, and it's true there are little objects floating around and plastic on the surface. But the athletes have already swum in much dirtier water than that.
On the other side of the mountains, the Bay of Guanabara gives a murkier picture. It's the site of the Olympic sailing events and also where 80% of the city's sewage ends up.
This is by far the worst water quality we've ever seen in our sailing careers.
Not far from there is the Rodrigo de Freitas Lake, where the canoeing and rowing competitions will take place. The debris and human excrement that ends up in these bodies of water pose a serious threat to the athletes' health, claims that Brazilian authorities have brushed aside.
I am absolutely confident that the local government of Rio de Janeiro will ensure that Guanabara Bay and the Rodrigo de Freitas Lake meet the conditions to host the competitions.
But Rio's own environmental agency has revealed that bacteria levels still remain dangerously high, despite years of effort to decontaminate the water.
It's a crime to misuse money like this when you have it, and the program for the decontamination of Guanabara Bay is an example of this, and of the impunity that rotten politicians and public administrators enjoy.
The city's making little progress. Authorities admit that they won't even be able to purify 80% of the water in Guanabara Bay, let alone restore it to its original pristine condition.
Now, one of the stories that has gripped the world so far this decade is the rescue of 33 Chilean miners. Would you believe it was 5 years ago? And now some of those who were rescued have attended the premiere of a new film in Santiago, which depicts what happened. The main character portrayed by none other than Antonio Banderas.
5 years after it gripped the world, their stories now being played out on the big screen.
Is that the only way in?
The only way in, the only way out.
How much longer?
About an hour.
The Chilean miners portrayed in the film, The 33, were at the premiere in Santiago on Sunday. Mario Sepulveda survived the ordeal along with his colleagues. He's played by actor Antonio Banderas.
Antonio Banderas, I gave him a 5. I'm more of a 7 because I'm better looking than he is, right? No, everything's great with the movie. We're all happy to be here with our colleagues today. I'm alive and healthy and appreciative of my country for everything it's done for us.
On August 5th, 2010, a gold and copper mine collapsed in the Atacama Desert, trapping the men 700 meters underground. They were feared dead until the 17th day, when they managed to pass a message through a drill head. The delicate operation to get them out took more than 7 weeks, with an estimated 1 billion people witnessing their rescue on television. The rights were swiftly acquired by Hollywood, but since then there's been division among the miners over the terms of their contracts, with some claiming to have been tricked out of royalties. The film's producers have declined to comment. Its leading man, however, evoked the difficulty of bringing recent history to the cinema.
On the one hand, we had an advantage, and that was the opportunity to have direct contact with those who'd lived through the story. This gave us a lot of information, but at the same time we had to channel all that information into a script that was already written.
On Saturday, the international cast and crew met with Chilean President Michelle Bachelet, but the government's come in for criticism from the miners themselves. Many are disappointed that the case against the owners of the San Jose mine was dropped, and some claim the state's not delivered on promises of support for their health and welfare since the accident.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see it on the big screen, won't it? Now, finally, a working-class neighbourhood in the central Mexican city of Pachuca has been transformed into a huge rainbow mural. Artists have spent the last 14 months turning the hillside into a giant mural in an effort to bring people together and change the area's gritty image. The individually painted houses combining then to form a surprisingly cohesive, swirly rainbow design. Residents saying there is now a new breath of fresh air in the neighbourhood. We'll leave you with those pictures. Another Inside the Americas next week, of course. Thanks very much for watching.